Well, I'm 23 now, but still every now and then my father would tell me the same old horror stories he encountered decades back, which now I know were not stories. You want to hear the stories tonight? Said my father. Well, I'm at 23 years of age, home on a holiday from work. Was excited as I used to be since my childhood. We had dinner, and after that the stories began. He had a diary where he noted it down too. He began to read it. Money is important. It's 1993 and I still don't have a good job. Maybe I should take up the night shift for equipment handling on that remote hilly area. While working, I will find something else. Step 2. I decided to take that job. My first day at the job. The facility is pretty big, situated on a hilly road with forest covering it from everywhere. The washrooms are outside the facility. Some 2 minutes walk, weird, I thought. I entered the facility and met Jake and John, that are my partners for the night shift. We were of the same age, so we got along pretty easily. We were introduced to our manager, who showed up the whole facility and what should we monitor. Pretty straightforward job, I said. The sun is going down and it's almost completely dark here. My manager gets up to leave, but before that, he turns towards us and says, "We have a rule here. Don't go outside at night. You wanna pee? Pee in your bottle. Wanna take a dump? Do it on a piece of paper, but don't go outside." Saying after this, he left. We were pretty surprised, and the fact that we can't go to the washroom sucks. Till 3 in the morning, things went by in a pretty normal way. Suddenly, Jake comes to me and John, who were chit-chatting near one equipment we were monitoring. "I wanna pee," he said. John and I looked at each other, thinking what should he do. "Just pee in some bottle, man," said John. "No, I'm going out." The doors to the facility were big and heavy, requiring to press a button to lock or unlock. In a sense of urgency and care, we decided to join Jake, just in case. Jake pushed the button. The doors opened in a very creaky noise. A wave of cold air grabbed us, and outside there was no light, no sound, just empty forest and darkness with cold winds. We three started walking towards the washroom. Located a little downhill, we could only hear our footsteps while the forest was silent. But it was nothing which would cause us to get scared. We reached the washroom. Jake got inside. While waiting for him, John and I chatted about the computers and how it is developing so fast. Suddenly, the already silent forest felt more silent. Jake came outside with an irritated voice, said, "Why the hell you guys were laughing?" We both were stunned. Nobody laughed, and we heard nobody laughing too. Jake refused to believe. Irritated, started going back, and we started following him. While the facility was not far away and we could see the lights from the road, dim in the night, something was not feeling right. Suddenly, John and I heard someone laughing behind us. Someone who is a child, 10 years at a maximum. But the laugh was evil, like it was mocking us, challenging us to face it. We both looked back, but there was nothing there, just a road and a cliff where you can easily jump off and die. Jake looked back briefly, unaware of anything. John and I picked our pace on our way back. Jake asked me what happened, but I just grabbed him and started walking faster. And then we all three heard the laughter. It was loud, scary, evil. It made the hairs on our neck stand up, and it was just behind us. We heard footsteps that were not ours. The facility was just in front of us. We opened the door and quickly closed it. John and I could swear we saw red eyes staring at us from the darkness while closing the door. While we were relieved of being inside the facility, the door suddenly opened and someone came inside. It was Jake, the actual Jake. He took his time to smoke inside the washroom and he was cursing us for leaving his behind. and he was cursing us for leaving him behind. The one that came with us back was not Jake. And then suddenly, we heard someone laughing inside the facility. The doors are no more working. We are trapped now. Our life is in danger. My father was sleepy, and he said he will tell me the rest tomorrow. But I know one thing, the facility is not too far away from me. I need to go there. The miraculous singing Gimli. I'm writing this as a warning. My daughter told me last night something that I simply can't ignore, as I now fear that others will be subjected to the horrors I witnessed firsthand. It's been years, but I still remember most of what happened clearly. Of course, parts are foggy now. Trauma has a way of making your mind wilt and crumple in a desperate effort to console itself. It began years ago when I was 8.5 years old. I ran along the streets, my eyes focused on the road ahead. The town where I live is small, so I know every step I take. My eyes eagerly dart here and there, consuming with a ravenous hunger the luxurious items lining the shop windows. For me, these items are precious, and only to be seen, though their ownership is a daily occurrence for others. I glue my face up against one window in particular, staring in at what looks to be a beautiful, gigantic inflated beach ball. Along with several other beach-related products, it outfits this particular window with a great showcase, complete with a hand-printed sign in black ink that reads, "Go back to the beach, prepared this time, and sail now." But I'm not worried about being prepared for the beach, as I have never been there before. Eventually, with a sigh, I step away, shaking from my mind any wish I had to own something from one of these shop displays. I don't really care which product, gadget, or gizmo, but I wish I could own something for once. For a few moments more, I linger in front of the shop, unsure of where to go now. Off school for the day, I would prefer to stay away from my home as long as possible. With the drunkard of a father and an almost constantly absent mother, this street seemed much more inviting than the drab, dimly lit hut my family calls home. I feel a light tap on my shoulder and spin around to see a tall man standing next to me. He's also looking into the window, his eyes resting upon the display I stand in front of. His long, hollow grey face almost seems wistful. "Want one of those, huh?" "Yes, sir, I really would," I respond, stuffing my hands in my pockets. "Course, I don't really have time, though." I don't want to tell him the reason I can't just walk up, right into the store, and purchase one with my allowance, namely that I have no allowance. The man nods his head slowly, his eyes still locked on the display in front of us. He seems as if he is lost in thought. A second later, however, he crouches down to my level. In his eyes there is a flicker of kindness that contrasts with his face. He stares at me for a second, almost as if taking in my features. "Tell you what," he says, his voice gentler than it was a second before. "I have a wonderful, beautiful ball in my car. It's not nearly as nice as this beach ball, but I'm sure it's all due to play with. Do you want to go get it?" I hesitate. My parents always warn me about strangers, but this man puts me at ease. "I'm only parked down a side street a few blocks down," he adds, noticing my reluctance and torn demeanor. "It's just a few minutes away." He stands up and begins walking down the street. For a split second I hesitate again but follow him. As he walks my eagerness and excitement grow. I can't wait to see my new toy, play with it, and take it home with me. We turn into the side street, and suddenly out of the shadows springs several more men. "Help! Help!" I shout, They quickly stuff a cloth into my mouth and throw a rough potato sack over my head, muffling my nose. They roughly grab my hands, strapping my wrists together. They toss me into a vehicle, and the engine roars to life. As the long ride begins, I cry, sob, and squirm, but I can't break free. Several hours pass, and as the trip continues, I eventually fall asleep from exhaustion. When I wake, I find my hands are free. I tear at the sack and pull it from my face. As I look around, my eyes quickly adjust to the darkness. In front of my face, a row of bars with rust eroding their surface is locked firmly into place. I desperately look around, but the bars are on all sides of me, above and below me. They are shoddily soldered to a metal rope and floor to form a small crate that's barely large enough for me to sit up. The reality of the situation hits me like a tidal wave, and panic sets in. The air is damp, cold, and smells of metal. I'm no longer in the vehicle. From the even darker walls in the distance, it looks as if I'm in some sort of warehouse. Through the cracks between the bars, I catch glimpses of flickering light. The man walked fast, taking in a foreign language and holding lanterns. My thoughts race wildly, blurred and desperate. Who are these men? Where am I? Where are my parents? Even my parents sound like a welcome surprise now. Hours blur as my terror gnaws at my sanity, and I begin to flinch at every noise. Occasionally I scream, but they ignore me and continue to pass my cage. I notice something else. Occasionally two men lug another, similar cage past mine. They carry it, one on each side, and inside the cage is another little boy, just like me. On each cage there is a plug with what I assume is the name of the boy inside. It's scribbled in rough marker. I fall asleep, and when I wake up, my cage is in a different spot. This time it is closer to the center of the warehouse. More cages, all containing other little boys like myself, surround me on either side. In front of us is where the real horror takes place. Two men approach one of the cages, hoisting it up and carrying it to the center of the warehouse. On the plug of the cage, the name Jimly is written. I noticed as the man passed me. I can see more clearly now. The tears from my eyes dry and now a curse on my face. On the platform, there is a bizarre contraption set up. A large metal frame with wires fixing it in position. The frame is somewhat spirally with each metal piece extending to where it is fastened in order to raise the frame and suspend it. It was absolutely hell in the air. On the platform itself sit scalpels, vials of strange colorful liquids, and long, thin metal birds that look something like rulers. Grabbing the boy and pulling him out of his cage as he screams, the men hoist him up in the metal contraption. They fix his arms and legs, wrapping some of the metal cups around his limbs and pulling on the wires until he is unable to move. With horror, I notice that each man looks exactly the same. Each one has the same gaunt, hollow, gray face that my captor had. Each one wears the same gray and brown outfit, and each man is tall and almost unnaturally thin. One man, maybe ever so slightly taller and thinner than the others, steps forward. He gestured to the boy, now suspended in the middle of the air like some comical spider being prepared for pinning to a bird of some fascinated scientist, and ruffles through some papers on a clipboard. Then he begins to speak. This is the last time you will ever hear, so listen up, Jimly. The process will take a while. You'll be able to feel everything, and your body isn't going to shut down to let your mind escape from the pain. It's a part of the process, so your own sake, I would suggest holding as still as possible. And just like that, they begin. One man administered some sort of injection into the boy's arm. a disgusting orange liquid that spreads throughout his body, making his skin paler and almost grayish. They shave his head with meticulous precision, as one man gently slides a scalpel over him to remove even the last of the hairs. The man even shaves his eyebrows until not a hair remains on the boy's body. Noticing his nose is still intact, one of the men gestures toward it, and another man takes a razor blade, slicing it off in a clean motion before showing up the hole where it used to be. As they work, his body begins to contort in some strange way, no doubt from the shot that now begins to take effect. From inside my cage I begin to sob, feeling my body heave uncontrollably as I finally register what will happen to me eventually. But the little boy's screams, once so vivid and loud, begin to fade. Watching, my mind suddenly comprehends the silence. Only for a second the boy looks forward, still positioned in the air, his expression blank, and then he begins to sing. A deep, dark song at first, but soon the pitch and intensity increases as he continues. His voice is tranquil for the most part, only breathed so often by a pause, during which I see his eyes flash with terror before they resumes singing again. But the men aren't done. As he continues to sing, one takes a saw, and with immaculate movements, makes some incisions around the boy's neck and face. He remains conscious and singing, but no longer does he scream in pain or agony. I have no doubt he still feels that, but he doesn't react. Blood drips from the incisions until with one smooth movement a man takes a saw, cutting off his limbs. With some fire torch they burn the limbs, cauterizing the bleeding stumps on his body. With extreme precision one of the men cuts open his stomach, rearranging all the necessary organs and adding several new ones, forcing these crucial elements upward into his chest. The process is undertaken once again. New incisions, new cuts, and new burns. Eventually, the only part of him that remains is the boy's head and neck, along with some bulky and weirdly snapped remnants of his body. His body, if I could call it that, is a burned, fleshy, and bloody mess, but it is no longer bleeding. Instead, it pulses ever so slightly as he continues to sing. The sound of the song drives me crazy as I watch. It is sorrowful, agonizing, and haunting, but in some weird way it's almost tempting. Occasionally I hear sobs rise up to match the singing from one of the other cages of the warehouse. Like me, the other boys know this is our fate. Eventually the boy is completed. The man places his mutilated body into a wooden box, and to the front of the box they fasten a sign that reads, and all the while he continues to sing. He does not stop, nor does he turn his head. His haunted, bloodshot eyes, tinted with a yellow hue, have no human emotion left to be glimpsed, at least not usually. Soon, one man grabs his box and hefts it up, carrying it off the platform. The blood is cleaned from the platform, and then the man chooses another cage. This time the cage they pick is closer to mine. Again and again the process happens. I sleep, drink, and eat whenever they are gracious enough to bring me food or water, and sit shivering in my now feast-covered cage. One night, amidst the chaos now running rampant in my mind, my attention is piqued by something. As one of the men walks past my cage with another victim, something slips from his waist. A key chain. My heart races as I think. Is it really possible to escape? As night deepens even further, I reach my hand between the bars. My arm is thin enough now, and I can easily reach far enough to grab the chain. With one fingertip, I hook the chain and draw it into my cage. My hands tremble as I fumble with the keys. In the distance, I can hear the mournful singing of the other boys, already transformed. As I try each key in the lock, I begin to panic. What if my key isn't on this chain? After several agonizing minutes, however, I find the right key. The padlock clicks open. I can feel my emotions surging, but an almost frantic hysteria sets in. Using all my energy, I slide the cage door open and crawled out. My body now unfamiliar with movement. This is driven weak, but I managed to find my footing after a few moments. Slinking through the shadows near the walls of the warehouse, my trembling body blends in almost perfectly with the background. The other boys' haunting songs fill the air, almost as if they know I am escaping and envoy me. The stench of blood, metal, and fences mixes in the air, making me gag. There was no food in my stomach to throw up. As I reach the exit, I hear footsteps through the warehouse door. I throw myself to one side, crouching down behind a stack of wooden crates. I close my eyes as tight as I can, tears slipping through the cracks. I can hear the footsteps getting closer. But just like that, I can hear the footstep fading again. I open my eyes, and he was gone. In an instant, I dart through the door, running as fast as my body can manage. My weakened limbs tremble as I run, and I nearly fall several times. Thorns and sharp rocks cut at my feet, but I ignored them. I kept running. Exhaustion tears at me, but eventually I reach a farmhouse at the edge of a wooden area, where I collapse. I ran away from home shortly after that, and now, years later, the memories of that place have grown distant, tucked away deep within some sort of the most critical parts of my mind. Those memories still exist, but I rarely think of them now. Sitting at the dinner table, my wife and I laugh as we watch my twin boys tussle. Boys, come down. There's enough food and time for everyone, I say, chuckling to myself. You both need to be more like your sister. Yeah, that's sure. I guess she didn't tell you where she snuck off today, right? So what do you mean by that? I glance at her and see Lily shift in her seat uncomfortably. She looks down at the table, her hands fidgeting nervously in her lap. The two twins grin at her mischievously, clearly proud of themselves for bringing up something that would take her down to their level. It was always two troublemakers. I was going to tell you, Dad. I wanted to ask if I could go. Go where? There is this new circus in town. I didn't go in, Dad. I swear, but there is a super cool new attraction that I want to see. Please? Well, maybe we can go all together, I respond, using my fork to scoop up another bite of the mouth-watering shepherd's pie my wife had made. Using my fork to scoop up another bite of the mouth-watering shepherd's pie my wife had made. What's so cool about it, anyway? My sons looks disgruntled, their faces making it evident that my reaction wasn't what they were hoping for. Lily, however, began to bounce up and down excitedly. I could tell that whatever it was, she wanted to see that. I saw a poster outside the circus. I didn't go in, I swear, remember? But apparently they don't stop singing. And they're just heads, Dad. Nobody knows how they do it, but they have been singing for years now, Dad. It's so cool. Can I go there? As I listen, the room spins around me, my mouth feels like ash, and the bite of the food turns tasteless. I try to swallow and feel the pressure of dryness in my throat, making me unable to. For several moments, I focus my eyes on my food. At least it feels like only a moment, but I can hear my wife's voice, full of concern, echoing from across the table. Honey, are you all right? I manage a note. Though my mind is screaming, I look up at my two boys. Just last year, they turned 8. I turn to my daughter once again, looking at her face. Her eager, excited eyes have been replaced with a hint of fear as she watches me. What's wrong, Dad? Nothing. Just thinking about work. What did you say that singing head was called again? I didn't, but I think this one is called the Miraculous Singing Gimli or something. Why, Dad? Can you go see them? Well, maybe later. I motioned to her plate, but you still have food to eat, and then it's time to bed. I hear the twins complaining, and my daughter looks disappointed, but I don't care. Tomorrow we're going to move to a different town, far away from this place. Definitely. I still can't go to bed without checking the closet for monsters. I have always been afraid of monsters in the closet. The funny thing is, I don't really know where the idea comes from, but it's not something you think about. But it's weird. It's as if every kid in the world come to that consensus that monsters lurk in there, in only their bedrooms. It doesn't matter how much their parents insisted, but it's true. They will continue to believe it sometimes for years off end, sometimes for years on end. I know I did it. When I was a child, I was absolutely terrified of the idea. It wasn't the thought that the monster would hurt me, not really. I mean, obviously, that's part of it. But it was always more so the watching that bothered me. The idea that something could be so still, so quiet, observing me in the privacy of my own home while I was none the wiser. Those nights in bed as a very young child, feeling as though I were being watched, were some of the longest and most dreadful nights of my life. I would wrap myself up in my blankets, head buried in a cocoon of it and fear, feeling the sweat bead down my forehead as minutes ticked by. I would overheat so badly that very often I got nosebleeds, but I was so terrified of something waiting for me to emerge from the safety of my bed that I would stay put, running my pillows with red blood. So I came up with a system, a ritual if you will. I made my dad go through it every night before I went to sleep, and he was complied, most likely because he was relieved that he didn't need to buy new pillowcases every other week. So he humored me, at least as a 6 years old, not so much when I was 12 or 18. And so as I grew older and the fear refused to subside, it fell upon me to go through the process each night. The steps were particular and I followed them religiously. Close and lock the bedroom door. If the door was opened at any point during or after, the entire process would need to be repeated. Look behind the curtains. I always had these long floor-length blackout curtains, and I was plagued by the idea of something standing behind them. Check underneath the bed. This step needed to be completed with a light, because if I wasn't 100% sure that I had, in fact, I had found nothing, but I would need to double check until I was certain. Look inside the closet. This step absolutely had to be last. My rationale was that nothing could sneak up on me from a quieter hiding spot. You can shuffle curtains quietly enough, or slowly merge from underneath the bed, but the sound of a door opening is more noticeable. But only then, once my bedroom has been thoroughly secured, would my compulsion subside and I would feel safe enough to go to sleep. I went on this way for years, being teased over it constantly by my parents until I relented and told them I had to be stopped. But I hadn't. And then, just like that, I was grown. Living alone in my very own apartment should have brought freedom and joy. But instead of that, my fear grew until it was nearly unmanageable. I sought out therapy and found understanding from a professional who had seen cases similar to mine in the past. It was a comfort that almost matched the relief my ritual brought, the knowledge that I wasn't alone. Together, we confronted my fear. I'm not going to go too deep into it. What happens during my therapy sessions is mine to know. All that's important is that we came up with a plan to help battle my compulsion. And it worked. Of course, I had bad days, and everybody does. But I was finally able to tell my family truly and with confidence that I did not need to follow a contrived set of instructions before going to bed each night. Looking back now, the realization that I went so long without doing my nighttime lockup makes me sick to my stomach. It was a night like any other when it happened. I had just finished up watching a movie when I noticed the time. It was half past midnight, and I kicked myself mentally because I had to be up early for work the next morning. I turned off all the lights in my apartment and made myself comfortable in bed. But something felt off. I wouldn't say I slept particularly soundly each night, but I was tossing and turning far more than I usually would. I felt the uncomfortable, revealing sensation of being watched, like when I was a child and my dad had messed up the ritual somehow, like your entire being is being laid bare. But I knew that giving into the compulsion I felt creeping up on me would only be a temporary reprieve. So I stayed in bed. I must have lied there for hours trying to create a sleep that would never come. So I stayed in bed. I must have lied there for hours trying to greet a sleep that would never come. And every minute seemed to crawl on, no matter how much I tried to distract myself. I kept up this struggle for the better part of the night before I cracked. I was sweating profusely, which I realized was because I had practically cocooned myself in my comforter. Just like when I was young, I untangled myself with that tired anger you feel from a particularly bad bout of insomnia. Grabbing my phone from its place on my beside table, I switched on the flashlight and began through the familiar steps. Even though it's been so long, it was muscle memory to me by that point. I always locked my bedroom door regardless of the ritual. I lived in a rather large apartment complex after all, but I went over to jiggle the handle regardless, as I already knew in my rational mind it was locked tight. I slid in my slippers over to my curtains even though I knew there was nothing there, as I now owned a shorter set that ended just around my wrist. I felt as though if I skipped a step in the entire affair would be tarnished. Feeling a wave of exhaustion sweep over me as I began to come, I swept my flashlight's beam over to the bed, peering from my place by the window first before getting on my hands and knees to take a look. There were boxes of junk and some wayward clothes in its dusty mold, so I looked around for a long moment. I knew that if I wasn't convinced I would see nothing, no creatures or no beasts, that my brain would make me do it all over again. I was so startled I banged my head on my bed frame, looking up and over to the other side of my bedroom. There was something very, very wrong. My closet door was open. I redirected my flashlight. There was a man in my closet. He was bald. Not just bald, completely hairless. No eyebrows or eyelashes, no hair on his arms. There was nothing. His bare skin was shiny and pulled tight around his muscle, as if it was a size too small, and his entire body was clammy and wet as if he had been sweating in anticipation, or maybe excitement. But it was his face, more than anything, that haunts my wakeless nights far more than any imaginary monster ever did. His eyes were a dull gray, glazed over with a far-off look in his eye, and yet he was somehow simultaneously looking directly into me. I have never in my entire life felt more exposed. It didn't matter that I was fully clothed. It was like I was naked under his gaze, but just not just of clothes, but of skin, muscle, and bone. The expression on his face was one of shock and amusement, almost deadlight, like he had been caught in a game of hide and seek only he privy to. Slowly, Deliberately, he reached out, but not for me. He grabbed the door handle with his sweaty hand, and I heard a disgusting wet noise when they connected. And then he began to close the door, as if everything was normal, as if he belonged there. As he did so, he brought a single finger up to his mouth, like he was shushing me. He never said it, never even made a sound, but I knew what he was trying to tell me. Don't spoil the fun. Then the door shut. The rest of the night is a total blur. I remember frantically unlocking doors and sobbing for help, and a crowd of people in the hall. Murmurs of reassurance, of confusion, or the judgment. Police officers asking me questions that I didn't know how to answer. All I know for certain is that I ended up staying at a close friend's house that night. The next day, I went down to the police station. We went over my story again, now that I was coherent, but it still didn't provide much as to details. They informed me they had looked into the security footage from around my building. It showed the man entering the building and creeping his way into my apartment, shuffling with a noticeable glee, several times making the same shushing motion to the cameras. But despite what they claimed to be extensive searches of the building coming up with no man, and there was no footage of him actually living. It was as if he had vanished, or he was still in the building, just hiding. That wasn't even the worst part for me. No, the worst part was when they told me where the footage was from, because the video of him forcing his way into my home wasn't from that night. It wasn't even from that day. It was from a week before. I went back only once just to grab my things. My friend came with me. I don't think I could have standed to go back alone. I rummaged through my house as quickly as possible, trying to grab anything I would need, wanting to be in and out. But I ended up replacing most of my wardrobe once I would moved out, because when I entered that bedroom one last time, something stopped me in my tracks, and something that prevented me from even considering grabbing my clothes from the closet. There in the door, about eye level, someone had carved a small hole. It hadn't been made by a drill. It had been worn down over time. Standing inside, it would have provided the perfect view of my bed. I still live with my friend, now my fiancée, and she's been more than understanding. We moved a bit out from that town into somewhere smaller, got ourselves a nice little house. I indulge in my ritual more than I ever had before. It now involves the entire house, a long, elaborate system that I won't explain. My fiance never judges, at least not to my face, because that man monster thing, whatever it was in my house that night. And I know for certain that he never left my closet, not once, for anything. And I fear that if I dare stop my ritual, if I let myself get too comfortable, if I allow myself a single night of reprieve, that one night I don't check will be the night that he comes back for me once again. The phone calls from the unknown. It started innocently enough. I was home alone one night, scrolling through social media when my phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but out of curiosity, I picked up. Hello, I said, my voice shaking slightly. Silence, just a heavy breathing on the other hand. I hung up, dismissing it as a prank call. But then it happened again the next night, and the next. Each time I answered, and each time it was the same eerie breathing. No words, no sound, just the sensation of someone, something on the other hand. I tried to ignore it, but dread crept in. I googled the number, but nothing came up. I considered blocking it, but something compelled me to keep answering. I wanted to confront whatever it was, to demand an explanation. One night I finally gathered enough courage. I answered and shouted, "Who are you? What do you want?" The breathing stopped. A moment passed, and then a voice, a low, distorted whisper, slittered through the phone. "I'm watching you." My heart dropped. I felt my skin crawl. I slammed the phone down, hyperventilating. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I bolted every door and turned off all the lights, hoping to hide from whatever was tormenting me. Days passed without any more calls, but the paranoia lingered. I convinced myself it was over until one evening, as I was watching TV, I got a knock on the door. My heart raced. I peeked through the peephole but saw no one. I hesitated, then called out, "Who is it?" Silence. My mind raced through possibilities. I convinced myself it was just my imagination. I sat back down, trying to focus on the show. But then my phone buzzed again, a message from an unknown number. "Look outside." Panic surged through me. I grabbed the nearest object, a lamp, and approached the window. I pulled the curtain back just enough to peek outside. My breath caught in my throat. There, illuminated by the street light, stood a figure, a shadowy silhouette with no discernible features. I stumbled back, heart pounding in my chest. My phone buzzed again, and I fumbled to read the message. "Don't be afraid. I just want to play." I dialed 911, my hands shaking. As I waited for the operator to answer, I glanced back outside. The figure was gone, but the air felt heavy, charged with dread. When the police arrived, I told them everything. They found nothing, no sign of an intruder, no footprints, nothing out of the ordinary. They assured me it was probably just a prank and left, but I could feel the unease settling back into my bones. That night, I locked every door and turned off my phone, hoping to escape the nightmare. But sleep eluded me. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, counting the minutes until dawn. Around 3 a.m., I finally drifted off, only to be jolted awake by my phone ringing. I groaned, my heart racing. I glanced at the screen. It was that same unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered, "Hello." A chilling laugh echoed through the speaker, sending ice through my veins. "You can't hide from me. I'm always watching." The line went dead. My heart raced as I tried to make sense of what was happening. I threw the phone across the room, and it shattered against the wall. That's when I heard it, a soft tapping coming from my window. I couldn't breathe. The sound was steady, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my keys and rushed out of the house, not stopping until I reached my neighbor's porch. I banged on the door, shouting for help. They let me in, confused and worried, but I couldn't explain. I just sat there, trembling, waiting for dawn to break. As the sun rose, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. I thought maybe I had escaped whatever nightmare had come to torment me. But when I got home, the door was wide open. Inside, everything was untouched, except for my shattered phone lying on the floor, and next to it, a single note written in a shaky hand: "You can't escape me."